Chicago is my birthplace. This is where I am from. Raised my whole life in Milwaukee. I have family and friends who are still here in the city of Chicago. I come to Chicago quite often. I still reside in Milwaukee. And I'm one of those folks who take the train in on a regular basis. And my biological father, unfortunately, is buried in Homewood, Illinois. So Chicago is a place I am very familiar with. And let me just also say that I am very happy to be here today because issues of faith is a very important part of my life, my faith in general. And I want to keep my remarks relatively short as to make sure we have time for questions and answers. And I want to quickly, in my presentation, kind of highlight several things for you. First, how HUD is helping winning the future, and about getting the word out about the mortgage scams that we're seeing. And I want to introduce you to Ken Brooks, who is our faith-based and community groups liaison. And hopefully then we'll have time for questions and answers later. But first of all, I like to recognize and thank all the faith and the community leaders who are here today for your leadership in ensuring that the voices of our most vulnerable citizens are always heard loud and clearly. Faith-based and the community groups are so important to HUD and to this administration, and we too believe in the basic religious tenet that we must help those in need, and that we are, in fact, our brothers and sisters' keepers, and that everyone has a right to an affordable home in a safe, healthy community of opportunity, and that no child's future should be governed by his or her zip code. Rather, all children should have access to the advantages of being an American, no matter what their ethnic heritage or their parents' financial situation might be. HUD's mission really is to create strong, sustainable, inclusive neighborhoods that are connected to education and jobs, to build on clean energy, and to provide access to opportunity for all Americans. And these are also the building blocks of what President Obama calls winning the future. Another way that HUD contributes to winning the future is fiscal, by taking responsibility for our country's deficit situation. 2 years ago, the credit markets had frozen, our economy was falling off the cliff, and the housing market seemed to have no bottom. But because we have all worked together, we are able to submit HUD's 2012 budget in an economic environment that has significantly improved. Through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, we have renovated and developed over 410,000 homes and reached over 850,000 men, women, and children who were either homeless or at risk of becoming homeless. Foreclosures are nearly down by 30% from a year ago, and we have been able to help more than 4.2 million homeowners facing foreclosure to stay in their homes. Now that is progress. Still, we know that there's much more work to be done, and HUD's budget tackles these challenges head on. Every federal department shares in the responsibility to make tough cuts so there's room for investment to speed up economic growth. And HUD is no exception. In a tight budgetary climate, we have had to make some difficult choices, including reductions to programs that, absent the current fiscal situation, we would not have made those cuts. For example, the reduction to the community block grants of some 7.5% in the President's budget is less drastic than many anticipated, but still it represents a hardship on local governments and communities. But American families are tightening their belts, and HUD needs to do the same, so we don't hand our children a future that is mired in debt. And President Obama has committed to a 5-year domestic discretionary spending freeze, and HUD more than meets its own goal as part of that freeze. I am proud to say that our 2012 budget request is 1% less than our 2010 enacted level of spending. And I know that these cuts do come at a very difficult time. Local governments are facing budget shortfalls that make even smaller cuts even more difficult to absorb, which is why we haven't cut our budget any further. An important principle that HUD used in making these budget decisions was to protect the families that were currently being served by HUD's programs. My boss, HUD Secretary Sean Donovan, is fond of quoting the president who said, "We cannot balance our budget on the backs of the most vulnerable citizens." And those families need you in the faith-based community even more today than ever before. We all know how foreclosures have rolled back 15 years of gain in some of our urban cores. All told, more than 4.2 million families have received restructured mortgages since April of 2009, more than twice the number of foreclosures completed in that same time frame. Now, we still have a long way to go, but we wouldn't have gotten here without your help. These last 2 years, we have provided housing counseling to some 6 million families, and we have addressed homeowners. We had distressed homeowners working with counseling agencies have received nearly twice the amount of mortgage modifications. But as you all know, foreclosures don't just harm families, it devastates communities. That is why I am proud to report that the $7 billion in neighborhood stabilization funding that we provided through communities around the country, this administration recognizes that unique relationship, and we have with your communities in mind, and it is one of the greatest weapons that we have left as we combat this ongoing financial crisis and the foreclosure crisis that we face today. These families, they know you, they trust you, they respect you, and so does this administration. Like few others, you can speak to them one-on-one to homeowners, whether they are at risk of foreclosure or becoming victims in a foreclosure scam, and that is a very powerful weapon, and we thank you for it. It is with no pleasure for me to say to you all today that Illinois is one of the top 8 scam states for foreclosure in the nation. This is a distinction that I don't think that any of us want for Illinois or for any other community. And HUD is determined to turn this around, to educate the public about the problem, to give them the knowledge to protect themselves, and to work with the media to spread this message, and to prosecute the bad boys and girls out there and put them out of business for preying on people who are desperate to save their homes and to keep their families safe. And although we've made great strides toward recovery in the last 2.5 years, the truth today is that foreclosure rate is almost 9%, and more than 8 million homes are at risk of foreclosure. This presents very fertile ground for the unscrupulous to prey on our country's most vulnerable. Loan modification scams and foreclosure relief schemes have reached epidemic proportions. Everyone is at risk. Those frequently targeted, unfortunately, are seniors, delinquent low-income borrowers, Hispanics, African Americans, Asian Americans, and other non-English speaking homeowners. With the advantage of technology, scammers can use TV, internet, and mail to give an official-looking false impression that they are affiliated with the government agencies or nonprofits. Over $25 million have been lost to these con artists. HUD has a website, HUD.gov/prevent loan scams, HUD.gov/prevent loan scams, one word, to get the information and support needed to recognize and to avoid the kinds of scams and to report those to the right authorities. This site provides a wealth of information on how to avoid being a victim, red flags and indicators, complaint forms, and a hotline for people to call to report these scams. And that number is, by the way, 1-888-995-HOPE or 1-888-995-4673. And we passed out some literature on that.
Now, some more. If you didn't get one, we have one.
Now, I hope that all of you will help us to carry back this message so that we can help to protect people who are falling victims of these kinds of scams. And I also now want to introduce, although he waved already, is Ken Brooks. He is our Chicago HUD staff. Ken coordinates outreach events for the faith-based and the neighborhood partnership in this area. There are faith-based neighborhood partnerships liaison in each of HUD's 11 offices within Region 5. These liaisons are generalists who serve as the front door of HUD and are available to answer questions and refer people to the right skills are needed. Ken also coordinates the faith-based neighborhood partnership, organizational development, and grant writing trainings here in the region. This year, next month, on the 20th at 9 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. at our Metcalf office building downtown Chicago, we'll be having some training. The target audience are new groups who are interested in the federal and local foundations and grant process, writing process, or employees of more established groups who may be new to fundraising arena. The morning session discusses the need to increase the capacity of organizations to make sure that it meets the threshold for particular grants. The afternoon session discusses the basics of a grant application process, including the key criteria that must be met in order to receive an award. And we are holding a half dozen seats open for members from this particular group. So if you are interested in joining, please be sure to bum rush Ken and get his business card and everything else so you can make sure that you'll have an opportunity to join us. And so you know as well as anyone that it hasn't been easy for communities over the last few years. These are tough economic times in which we are coming through. We have a long way to go. But at HUD and across the Obama administration, I want you to know that we are committed to helping to recover. And our faith-based partners are an integral part of that ongoing effort. And let me just close out on a personal note. I began on a personal note. Let me close on a personal note. I don't aim to stand up here and to talk to you about issues of faith from some moralistic, self-righteous, indignant, and intolerant perspective. But as a person of faith, that's why I always love talking with groups about faith. I was called to faith a number of years ago. And it was when that happened to me that I realized that my life was no longer just about me. My life was about others. My life was about what can I do every day in my life to help others to achieve success and to find their way out of the darkness. As the first of 9 children to receive a college degree in my family, it wasn't just me walking across that stage. It was my entire family who supported me in that process. And it was my faith that sustained me to endure what I had to endure. And as I look at the heights to which I have been blessed to achieve, I have to keep in mind and to look back and extend my hand and say that there are others who are left behind, who are still trying to find that light of hope in that darkness. And people of faith understand the importance of that more than others do. And the faith-based community and community groups out there, we understand that. And I just believe the thing that motivated me to go into public service, to leave the private sector, it is the rationalization that you are part of something that is far greater than yourself. And that each of us, in our own way, have something to give back. Some of us will be blessed to do that on a large scale by the elected office or through some other grand means. But as Robert Kennedy once said, that few of us would have the greatness to bend history itself. But each of us can work to change a small portion of events. In our daily walk, we have that opportunity to be that beacon of hope. In our daily walk, we have that opportunity on a small scale to touch someone, to change someone, to improve someone's lives, or to bring hope where there is despair, to bring healing where there is brokenness. And on that, as we close out, will be written the history of this generation. So issues of faith are important. And it's important of the interfaith crowd as well. And we have to understand that by the grace of God, we all go there. We are all tied into this thing together. And we all must continue to work together, not just to build up a better and stronger Chicago and America, but with God's help, a better world. So, thank you. God bless you. And is it question time now? All right. I thought today's event was a wonderful gathering. I think that anytime you're having people of faith and the community-based folks here to talk about issues of economic development and how do we develop sustainable and healthy communities is always a wonderful thing. And I think that the Niagara Foundation should really be commended for hosting these series like this, bringing in various policymakers and the like from various walks of life to talk about ways that we can partner. To have this kind of a gathering and to bring in such a cross-section of people together around these common issues can only be good things for Chicago, and we can replicate this elsewhere, and I'd love to do it.